Alright, so I realized that as I just uploaded a video about Jesus dying as a sinner, or not dying as a sinner, but I realized that even if you say, okay, Jesus died as a sinner, that technically you could say, well, figuratively that just means that, he was, he died the death of a sinner. Like I said, you could say they mean the same thing, basically, but I get upset because I know that when most people say that, I know that they kind of mean something different. They mean that he was imputed with, the sins of the world. And I'm looking at an article on the Master's, what is this? The Master's Seminary. It's basically a John MacArthur thing on one of his websites. I was looking it up, and it goes about, it asks, did Jesus become a sinner on the cross? And he goes through saying, well, there's a lot of people that teach this, and, he lists Benny Hinn and Kenneth Copeland and all these charismatics, and they try to separate themselves and are saying, "Oh no, we don't say that Jesus became a sinner on the cross like these people do." But then here's what John MacArthur says: God the Father, using the principle of imputation, treated Christ as if he were a sinner, though he was not, and had him die as a substitute to pay the penalty for the sins of those who believe in him. He lists some verses. Isaiah 53, 4 through 6, Galatians 3:10 through 13, and 1 Peter 2:24. And he says, on the cross he did not become a sinner, as some suggest, but remained as holy as ever. But he was treated as if he were guilty of all the sins ever committed by all those who would ever believe, though he committed none. The wrath of God was exhausted on him, and the just requirement of God's law met for those for whom he died. So it's very strange that he says, well, no, he didn't literally become a sinner on the cross, but God judged him as if he was a sinner. So how does that make sense that Jesus was punished for sins that he didn't commit? Where does the Bible teach that God, the Father would ever do such a thing, would punish somebody for sins that they didn't commit? That would be unjust. And he mentions at the very beginning, God the Father using the principle of imputation. So he does believe that something happened here at the cross where, the sins of mankind were imputed to Christ. He says that the wrath of God was exhausted on him. He was treated as if he were guilty of all the sins ever committed by all who would ever believe. So, I do think that, the way that he was put to death from the hands of men was as if, he died the death of a sinner because, he didn't deserve that, obviously. And God the Father allowed that, we could say that. But I don't think that there's any kind of a direct thing from God the Father where, where, like John MacArthur says, the wrath of God was exhausted on him. So, there's a lot more to break down there, and but just some interesting ideas. And I think it's interesting how basically these charismatics or these Word of Faith people or whatever, and then John MacArthur and these Calvinists, I think they all basically believe substitutionary atonement, or not substitutionary, I'm sorry, the penal substitutionary atonement. But the Word of Faith people, believe differently, and the Calvinists are trying to separate themselves from them, but they kind of both share the same beliefs at the heart of it. And, the core of the penal substitutionary atonement is wrong, no matter what. And it's basically the same thing. It doesn't make sense either way. I was going to say it almost makes more sense that if Jesus did become a sinner, literally, and then was punished for sin, because, it makes even less sense, it seems, that Jesus, was perfectly sinless and was punished for sins. But that's it's interesting. I keep talking about this. I don't know if I'm getting any closer or helping clarify anything, but I just know that this is wrong, and trying to work this all out to explain it for the better. But man, I just heard that again, and I just think that so many people just don't want to look into this and just believe what you're told on this. But there are other theories of the atonement I've talked about. And so anyway, before going on, I guess I'll just end these thoughts here. God bless.